All right, so good morning everyone and welcome to this session titled Building App Cloud Mobile Extensions with Swift. This is just one of the 3 sessions on native iOS development during the whole of Dreamforce, which is over 500 breakout sessions. My name is Gaurav Khetrapal. I work as the Vice President of Mobility and Technology Evangelism at a company called MetaCube, which is a PDO partner as well as a consulting partner with Salesforce. It's most appropriate that we have both the iOS sessions today because today is coincidentally the 5th death anniversary of Steve Jobs, the great man who invented iPhone and several other things, and iOS and Swift is all thanks to him. So thank you, Steve. Thanks to you. I'm here on stage today again. So before we start, do not make any buying or purchasing decisions based on what you see or hear during this session. And I'm sure by the time we all go back on Friday to our homes, we will have this memorized word by word. Okay, so this is what I plan to cover over the next 40 minutes. I'll start off with an introduction. I'll do a sampling of the audience. I'll give an overview of what extensions are, how extensions work, and most importantly, why extensions are needed. Then we'll do a deeper dive into some key concepts like a host app, a containing app, and how an extension communicates between a host app and a containing app. We'll see how the host app and containing app share code with the extension. Then I'll do a quick introduction of the App Cloud Mobile SDK, or the erstwhile Salesforce iOS SDK. And then we'll look at 3 examples, a today extension and how we can link it to Salesforce One, a sharing extension, and a watchOS extension. We'll then head over to some demos and a code walkthrough just to understand the key concepts. And then we'll do a recap, and I'll open the floor for some Q&A. So before I start, how many of us here are developers? Okay, so developers are people who always claim it's not a bug, it's a feature, and that's kind of the first rule you learn as a developer. Any iOS developers, Objective-C developers here? Okay, so it's always nice to be an iOS developer, but the pain point is when you need an iPhone 7 to test your app and it's $800, you settle for an Android phone sometimes. Swift developers, how many of us develop on Swift? Yeah, so Apple recently released some statistics which are very interesting. Swift has been around for more than a couple of years now. I was at WWDC 2016, which was coincidentally at Moscone Center a few months back, and they released Swift 3. So the penetration of Swift is still not what Apple expected till now. A lot of people are still developing apps on Objective-C, so it's kind of in a way similar to Salesforce. The situation between Salesforce, what they call now is Classic, and Lightning. And Apple is generally gradually pushing developers towards Swift 3, and I'm sure by next year, the majority of developers would actually be developing on Swift. Any people who have developed on watchOS here as well? Yeah, so a few. I mean, that's not surprising considering the original Apple Watch didn't really pick up, and the one they launched at earlier this year, as well as the watchOS 3, it is a much more improved operating system, so it's doing considerably better. And we are seeing, at least I am seeing a lot of clients asking for watchOS apps, which can be used in the enterprise as well. Just a quick introduction about myself. I've been a Dreamforce speaker. Again, it's a coincidence. I presented this very session in this very room last year as well. I am a moderator on the forums. I run a developer user group in Jaipur, which is a very tourist spot, which is a very popular tourist spot in India. And then I contribute on Stack Exchange as well. And over the last couple of years, I've kind of had my share of fame with Salesforce. Okay, so what extensions are? So this was actually a term which basically erupted what's called the App Store economy. And when the App Store was launched, there was an app for that, and there was an app for this, and eventually there was an app for everything. So since there are so many apps, why do we actually need extensions? There is a good reason to it. Extensions were announced 2014, more than 2 years back. And the way Apple defines extensions is that it's something that allows you to build custom functionality and content. The important part is this is beyond your app, and it's available to users while they're actually not using your app. So while they're using the other apps or while they're using the iOS itself. Some very common examples which people use all the time. So a photos application where you just click a photo and then you bring up an action sheet and you can choose any app how you want to share that photo. A photo editing application where you click a photo and then you can use any editing extension and edit that photo before you send it or put it on Facebook. And a browser extension, which again, you can, if you're reading something and you want to post it anywhere, that's again a common example. One of the most common examples, one of the most common use cases for extensions are Today extension, which you see on the left. The calendar extension is probably the most used extension. iOS also allows building extensions for custom keyboards, as well as extensions for iCloud, so which allows you to, if you have files stored on the iCloud, you can directly process, open them using any app and process them and save them back in iCloud. So the list of supported extensions is actually fairly long. As I said, Today is one of the most common extensions. It's not just for iOS, it is for OS X or macOS Sierra now. Sharing is again very common. Action sheets are very common. Photo editing is common with sharing applications. Then there are others as well which are not so common. There is Finder Sync, document provider, custom keyboard, and watchOS extensions are picking up as well. So let's try and understand. So now that we've basically understood what an extension is, why do we need extensions? There are several researches which show that unless you are watching videos or listening to music or doing some kind of a social engagement, users have a very short attention span with apps, especially with business apps. They want to open it, they want to see the data they need, do the transaction they do, and they be done with it. So it's important that they get easy access to be able to perform these transactions, look up the data, and that's where extensions come in. So you can just you can just do a single tap on the Today view. You can view things like your dashboards, reports, pending tasks, and I'll come to examples later as well. So why did I decide to build something like this? And so the demand for supporting Salesforce extensions in the Salesforce ecosystem is actually, so this is an idea which was floated way back. This is more than 5 years old, and since then it's gained a lot of votes, and it's been unfortunately been under point threshold forever. The idea is that there is a lot of valuable information as a Salesforce user which can be put into extensions. So for example, if you are a sales rep and you want to see what are your pending tasks for today, so the Today extension is a great candidate for that. Again, you could also want to see a dashboard snapshot in Today view, or you could want to share stuff on Chatter with using extensions as well. So let's take a quick look at what is the typical life cycle of an extension. So similar to an app, the user chooses an extension. The system launches the app extension runs, and then the system kills the app extension. That's a very simplistic view. Digging a little bit deeper, there is something called a host app and a container app. So for example, if I am in Photos app, and then I bring up the action sheet, then the host app for me is Photos, and the containing app is something which I have built along with my extension. So the way it works is that the host app sends a request to my extension. The extension interacts with the containing app, gets whatever data it needs, and it responds back to the host application. To elaborate further, the way it works is the host app sends out a request to the extension. The app extension typically invokes the containing app using a URL and a NS URL request. And then the containing app actually reads or writes whatever it needs to in a shared resource, which is accessible both to the extension and the containing app. It reads the data out of that shared resource and then responds to the host app. So the host app itself is oblivious to the fact that there is something going on between the app extension and the containing app as well. So how do you create an extension? If you are an iOS developer, this is a screen maybe you see day in, day out, and in your dreams as well. So when you start Xcode and you try and create a new project, there is a column where it says application extension, and you can actually choose the type of extension you want, and it creates you a template Xcode project for that extension, which you can then use. So let me just spend a few minutes talking about what the App Cloud Mobile SDK is, or it used to be called the Salesforce One Mobile SDK. So it's a SDK provided for developers, which basically lets them focus on building their core app functionality and not reinvent the wheel. It provides 3 methodologies for building apps. One is native. So if you are building on iOS, you use something like Objective-C or Swift. If you're on Android, you use Java. The advantage is that since you're native, the apps are faster, the performance is better, the UI is more polished, the transitions are better. The other approach is using something which is called a hybrid approach, where you use Cordova or Ionic or Accelerator Titanium, and then package it up and deploy it on a device. The problem with this is that since it is not native code, it is in some manner translated into native code, whether it's cross-compiled or whether there is a container that's running it. So it's typically slower, the UI transitions. As a developer, you can actually make out whether it's a native app or a hybrid app. And then the third is pure HTML5. So this is something which is not installed on a device. It's what we typically call a mobile responsive site, and you would access it in the browser. So Salesforce One supports all 3 of them. Native and hybrid are the most common. In fact, native is the most common when using the iOS SDK. Some of the features that the SDK provides, it has a built-in OAuth 2 capability, so you don't need to worry about the authentication piece of it. It uses an access token and a refresh token. So once the user is logged in, as long as he has a valid refresh token, that session lasts forever. It has API wrappers, so you can fire your sockets directly from the app using a SF REST API class. For hybrid apps, it has an app container, which basically provides the container that a hybrid app needs to run on a device. Most importantly, it has something called a secure offline API. There are a couple of frameworks which Salesforce has introduced. One is called a Smart Store. It's an encrypted NoSQL data store which stores data on device. And then there's something called a Smart Sync. So the idea is that if you're offline, you store everything locally using in the Smart Store, and once you're online, Smart Sync automatically detects that you have a valid internet connection, and then it pushes data back to Salesforce. And it also has a lot of mobile-centric features like push notifications as well. Okay, how do you get the SDK? It's an open source project on GitHub. So you just clone the repository, and you need Node.js and NPM, and once you install Force iOS, you are good to go. Okay, so this is an example use case for the Today extension that I built. So as we can see, this is the calendar view, and then this is the Today extension, which is showing up here. So here it's showing me the tasks that I have pending. So I have a client call, which is pending since 26th August 2015, old screenshot. And then I have a few emails and a few meetings planned. And then the magic that is happening is actually in the socle itself. You actually do a socle which retrieves the ID, subject, type, activity date, priority status, and you check if the task is not completed, and the owner ID is myself. So that's done using a class called SF User Account Manager, and the current user ID retrieves the currently logged in user based on the session information, and then I'm limiting it to 10 records because otherwise it's a bit clunky in terms of user interface on the Today extension view. The important thing is that since the Today view is actually not an app, So you need to configure something called an application group, which you normally don't need to do for other applications and extensions. And unless you have this configured as part of your entitlements, Xcode will keep throwing errors and your extension will not work properly. So this is an important step for developing a Today extension. What I also did, and this is somewhat unrelated to the extension part, is, but it's a very common use case again with the mobile SDK, is that you can link your custom application to Salesforce One. The way you would do it is, for example, here I have a client call, which is one of the open pending tasks I had, and I was able to retrieve its ID, which is the task ID. And then all I need to do is I need to open the URL, which is Salesforce One /s object, pass that task ID, and then view. So this will open that particular task in the view mode within Salesforce One. This is typically called deep linking in iOS terminology. I'll actually come to the demos. I'll club all of them together, and I'll just continue with the rest of the part for now. So as I mentioned, another common example is sharing information on Chatter. So for example, if you are in Safari and you are viewing a very interesting site and you want to share that on Chatter. So this is a host app, which is basically, so Safari is my host app, and then this is a host app which is showing how I can share it. So, and then yeah, so this is the extension, and then once it's shared, it shows a confirmation message here. Okay, so here I'm sharing, this is the host app where I'm basically putting in a URL and then I'm putting in some notes, and again, the sharing works similar. This we'll cover in the demo. This is an example of the Photos application extension. So here I have a photo which I've selected, and then it brings up an action sheet with all the valid extensions. So the one that you see without any icon, the share extension is the one which we have. And it works kind of similar, that once you invoke, as long as you have a valid session, it is able to post it to Chatter. Okay, watchOS, although I've included this, the important thing here is that the App Cloud iOS SDK does not actually support watchOS. So whatever I've done is more of a hacky way of doing things, and it's not exactly recommended unless you have an app which you want to build for watchOS 3. I think the official support will come in some time. And this is a very simple extension which I wrote, which basically shows what all I have in Chatter, and then I can reply from my watch itself. And once I reply, it gets posted into Chatter. Okay, so let me just switch and do some demos now. So first I'll launch the containing app. So as I said, I did the same session last year as well, and the way the extensions work much better on our device. Unfortunately, we do not have an Elmo, so I cannot do it on a device, but we'll see. I mean, the demo guards, if they are kind, we'll probably pull it off on an emulator as well. So here I have a link, and I can just add some notes. Hopefully this works. And then, okay, so it says it works. And so this is my Chatter. Yeah, so if you do anything with Benioff's name at Dreamforce, it probably works. The other example was sharing photos. So let me just select a photo from here. So these are large size photos, and I'm not sure if I have enough enough of a limit on my OR, but let's see. In any case, it either works or it shows us an error. These are large photos, typically 5 to 6 megs. And what it's doing in so it failed because, and if you can see in the logs, it's probably because I'm overrun my limit. Yeah, so it says storage limit exceeded. But the idea is same, and these are some of the test images I had done earlier today. So that's probably why it got exceeded. And then we can run the corresponding extensions. So I'll run one in Safari. So it should now launch Safari with an option to us where we can launch our extension. Okay, so I have the Apple site open now, and if I bring up the action sheet, I can put in some notes, and then it says it's posted. Yeah, so it did eventually post it. Similarly, what we can do is we can launch it again, bring up the Photos application. And then it's similar. You launch, you bring up your extension. And then it will try and do the same thing. And probably fail with the same error because of the storage issue. Yeah, storage limit exceeded. Okay, so coming to the key concepts here. So I built a view controller for fetching the images. And then we check for extensions whether it's a valid image or not. And once you've selected the photo, just to check if it's a valid image in the library. And then similarly for the link, we had 2 extensions, one for the photo and one for the link. There are a bunch of validations here that the link is valid or not. And the important thing here is that for the extension, we actually pass all the data to the extension. We do all the validations here as well, just to be sure that it is working or not. And then we actually hit this /feed items, which is a chatter endpoint. And the photo gets posted as an attachment, and the link that we had shown gets posted as a content on it. So that's a very high-level overview of how this works. All this code is on GitHub. It's open source, and it's ready for iOS 10. So I'll share the link for that as well. Coming to the next one. So chatter 1, as I said, this is more of a hacky way of doing things. So this does not really work very well with Xcode 8. I'm going to show it on Xcode 7.3 if it stops crashing. That typically happens when you have multiple Xcodes. Let's see. Okay. So now I've chosen a watch as the target, and this is my extension. So now it does the same thing. It tries to detect if I have a valid session or not. In case I do not have a valid session, it will prompt for an error. Otherwise, it will try and retrieve my chatter feed. Probably looks like I don't have a valid session here either. Yep. And since this is a simulator, there are pairing issues very often with the device simulator and the watch simulator, which typically does not happen with a device. Let me just launch it again to see if it works. Probably getting some pairing errors. So without the Elmo, it's a little bit difficult, but I'll at least explain the code concepts behind it. So similar to what we had in the other extension, we have our controllers in the watch kit. So I essentially have 3 controllers here. One is for the list view, which is a table view, and then I have a detail controller, which basically shows all the chatter information. It shows the name of the user who sent the post, the user who created that post, as well as the chatter body. And then I have this pre-canned text, which basically is used for a default reply. And the thing is similar. It invokes the parent application, which is calling the chatter API, as we had seen, and then it's trying to post on chatter. And then the usual, if you are familiar with iOS, watchOS development, you need to have a controller each for glances as well as notifications. So coming back, some of the key concepts which are important if you want to develop extensions. Be mindful of the extension lifecycle, when your extension gets triggered, when it terminates. How it interacts with the host app, container app. We learned some examples about today extensions, sharing extensions, watchOS extensions. If you have not used the Salesforce One Mobile SDK, I highly recommend you check out the GitHub repository. The Salesforce One iOS SDK GitHub repository. It has a lot of good sample applications, which does not have any examples for extensions as such, but there are a lot of native and hybrid examples, which are handy to understand how things work. Chatter REST API, how you interact with chatter, how you post messages and content on chatter. And then watchOS notifications, how do these notifications work? As I said, all 3 extensions are available on GitHub. It's an open source repository. Questions? All right, then thank you so much and enjoy the rest of Dreamforce. Thank you.